We are back live and direct. We about to wrap this up real fast. I know my bro was like, man, are you gonna come back? Yeah, I'm back, man. I'm back. I'm back. Just had to take a quick breather, fill up on my libations. All right, but we left off. I was talking about Bunker Hill, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I was talking about a black patriot and spy who helped make possible the 1781 Yorktown victory during the American Revolution that established an American independent nation. So then I was also showing you, and I want to show you something. I'm going to show you how in certain books that try to be biased, how they take certain things out. Yes, academia do that. They take certain things out. That's why you got to go older and older and look at the paintings and look at what was oldest. They would take things out the pictures. So I want to just get something in your brain. Remember the infamous picture of the 1776, the crossing of Delaware on Christmas night. Two men depicted in the front of the boat included Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell. You got to research this, family. See, when you do scholarship, you don't have to argue and be upset. I said, and the infamous, excuse me, I said infamous, I meant the famous picture of the 1776 crossing of the Delaware on Christmas night. The two men depicted at the front of the boat included Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell, two black patriots who served with George Washington and other American generals during the Revolution. Few Americans are aware that many of the soldiers who fought during the American Revolution were black. And unlike later segregated regiments in the Civil War, many of the units in the American Revolution were fully integrated, with black patriots fighting and dying side by side their white fellow comrades and soldiers. While this part of our history is unknown today, Americans knew this information in previous generations because of black historians such as William Neal. Neal was an award-winning young scholar in Boston during the 1830s who studied law and became the first black American to hold posts in the federal government. In 1852, he authored Services of Colored Americans in the Wars of 1776 and 1812. Now watch this. Let me show you something. See how the picture in 1776, you can see Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell. They got their heads circled. The black men, they got their hair circled. Now watch what I show you in the books that the Europeans write. And I'm gonna show you. Let me get right back to it. I lost the page. Hold on, let me find it. Where they take them right out the picture. Hold on, be patient. I'm about to show you. They try to depict everybody as a slave, but we know that's not valid. And whitewashers all out the history books. So let me show you real fast how the picture just totally changed. Here go the picture in 1776, the manner in which the American colonies declared themselves independent of King of England throughout the different provinces of July 4th, 1776. Now you see in there, you don't see the picture that I just showed you? That's older. You see do you see the two brothers that I just told you that they took out? Watch, I'm going to show you. Now let me read to you again. Here go the other one, where I'm going to show you where you can see Prince Whipple and Oliver Cromwell, two black patriots who served with George Washington and other American generals during the Revolution. They circled on here. You see that? You see them on there? They circled on there, family. All you got to do is do some little research for yourself. But few Americans were the soldiers who fought in that war. But despite such extensive works, many of our early black heroes and patriots are unknown today and equally unknown in so much of what occurred in black political history. That history will surprise and shock many of us, but it is a history based on indisputable facts and documents. And too often, family, only a handful of heroes from black history are presented, much like showing only a snapshot or two out of several 100 million albums of photos. Too much information is not presented today, and often too many conclusions are wrongly assumed from little that is seen, family. For example, while students in school early learned that the first load of slaves sailed up the James River in Virginia in 1619, and thus slavery was introduced in America, few learned about the first slaves that arrived in the Massachusetts colony set up by the Christian Pilgrims and Puritans. When the slave ship arrived in Massachusetts, the ship officers were arrested and imprisoned, and the kidnapped slaves were returned to Africa at the colony's expense. That side of history is untold today. A similar omission occurred when the signers of the Declaration of Independence are discussed. For example, if asked to list the slave-owning founding fathers of the signers, no one would hesitate to name Thomas Jefferson. But if you asked to name a second slave owner from among the 56, few other names would have been mentioned. And if asked to name the anti-slavery leaders who signed the Declaration, probably no one would mention Samuel Adams. Yes, I said Samuel Adams, or Stephen Hopkins, or Benjamin Rush, or Eldridge Gerry with the G, or James Wilson, or John Adams, or Roger Sherman, or Benjamin Franklin, or John Witherspoon, or the many other anti-slavery founders. To identify these individuals, you have to see some of the pictures that I post. But today, black history too often is presented just from a Southern viewpoint, describing only slavery and its atrocities, as well as the numerous civil rights violations that occurred, that continue well beyond the end of slavery. Yet there was also what may be called a Northern viewpoint with many praiseworthy events. And to be completely accurate in the telling of black history, since it's Black History Month, family, that we like to call it, the story must be told not only of the martyrs, the ones that died, but also the heroes, just as was done by famous black historians such as William Neal, Carter G. Woodson, Benjamin Quarles, Joseph Wilson, Booker T. Washington, Edward Johnson, Amos Cress Wilson, John Henry Clark, Dr. Joseph Ben, Amos Wilson, Sheikh Anta Diop, Ivan Van Sertima. We can go on and on. One of the world's oldest history books is the Bible. That's what we like to say, right? Okay. It offers a good lesson of this point and affirms the approach taken by the black historians. All know the Bible story of David's victory over Goliath, yet the Bible also tells the story of David's adultery with Bathsheba and of his failure with his son Absalom. If only David and his failures were mentioned, that would not be the complete story. On the other hand, if only David and his victories were listed, neither would that be the complete story. Why? Because it takes all sides of a story to see the full, the accurate picture. So the Bible and early writers in black history illustrate the principle that the good, the bad, and the ugly must be presented in order to transmit the full story, not only of the history in general, but of African American political history in particular, family, which is the policy that will persuade in the work that we're trying to do. But although the history of black Americans began in 1619 with the arrival of the first slaves in America, the political history of black Americans actually began much later in 1787, the year in which the American political system was constructed, the year in which the Constitution was written. Today, many critics assert that the Constitution was a pro-slavery document, and to prove this, they point to the 3/5 clause, claiming that the Constitution says that blacks are only 3/5 of a person. One of the earliest black Americans to investigate the claim was the famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass. Douglass had been born into slavery and remained a slave until he escaped to New York in 1838. 3 years after his escape, he delivered an anti-slavery speech in Massachusetts. He was promptly hired to work for the state's anti-slavery society. And he also served as a preacher at Zion Methodist Church. During the Civil War, Douglass helped recruit the first black regiment to fight for the Union and advised Abraham Lincoln on the Emancipation Proclamation and other important issues. Following the Civil War, Douglass received presidential appointments from Republican President Ulysses S. Grant, Rutherford B. Hayes, and James A. Garfield. Democratic President Grover Cleveland removed Frederick Douglass from office, but Republican President Benjamin Harris reappointed him. See, this history. It's supposed to be Black History Month. We got to do history. During Douglass' first year of freedom, he studied at the feet of abolitionist William Lloyd Garrison, who taught him that the Constitution was a pro-slavery document. Douglass accepted this claim, and his early speeches and writings reflected that belief. However, Douglass later began to research the subject for himself. He read the Constitution, and what he found revolutionized his thinking. He concluded that the Constitution was not a pro-slavery but an anti-slavery document. He explained, "I was, on the anti-slavery question, fully committed to the doctrine touching the pro-slavery character of the Constitution. I advocated it with pen and tongue, according to the best of my ability. Upon a reconsideration of the whole subject, I became convinced that the Constitution of the United States not only contained no guarantees in favor of slavery, but, on the contrary, it is in letter and spirit an anti-slavery instrument, demanding the abolition of slavery as a condition of his own existence as the supreme law of the land. Here was a radical change, in my opinion, brought directly when I escaped from slavery into contact with a class of abolitionists regarding the Constitution as a slave-holding instrument. It is not strange that I assumed the Constitution to be just what their interpretation made it, but I was now conducted the conclusion that the Constitution of the United States was not designed to maintain and perpetuate a system of slavery, especially as not one word can be found in the Constitution to utilize such a belief. So Douglass therefore concluded, the Constitution is a glorious liberty document. Read it, preamble. Consider it, purpose. Is slavery amongst them? Is it a gateway or is it a temple? And you got to research that for yourself. What's up, babe?
How you doing?
It's almost that time, but I'm going to touch on a couple other topics real fast, and we're going to head out of here. I'm going to touch on a couple other things. I'm going to touch on, because this is Black History Month. This is Black History Month, right? Okay. So in 1856, Sumner gave a 2-day-long speech in the U.S. Senate against slavery. Following the speech, Democratic Representative Preston Brooks from South Carolina came from the House across the rotunda of the Capitol and over the Senate, where he literally clubbed down Sumner on the floor of the Senate, knocked him unconscious. This him. Let me finish. Knocked him unconscious and beat him almost to death. According to the sources of that day, many Democrats thought that Sumner's clubbing was deserved and it even amused them. It was 3.5 years before Sumner received his health sufficiently to return to the Senate. See, they drew pictures back then, family. This was in their papers. And no surprisingly, the first speech he delivered on his return to the Senate was against slavery. What happened to Democrat Preston Brooks following his vicious attack on Sumner? He was proclaimed a Southern hero and easily reelected to Congress. So they praised him for that. In 1856, the Republican Party entered its first presidential election, running Republican John C. Fremont against Democratic James Buchanan. In the election, the Republican Party issued its first ever party platform. It was a short document with only 9 planks in the platform, but sufficiently 6 of the 9 planks set forth bold declarations of equality and civil rights for African Americans based on the principles of the Declaration of Independence. Research Dred Scott. Amazingly, according to Democrats, in 1856, ending slavery would not only be dangerous, but will also ruin the happiness of the people. Despite such clear differences, the Republicans lost the election. The next year, 1857, a democratically controlled Supreme Court delivered the Dred Scott decision, declaring that blacks were not persons or citizens, but instead were property and therefore had no rights. See, when I went over the Black Christian codes, I'm going to have to do that again because it's Black History Month. I'm going to have to do that again. Yep. But the Dred Scott decision declared that blacks were not persons or citizens, but instead were property and therefore had no rights. Do you hear that? I know y'all hear that, family. No rights, which the white man was bound to respect, and that the Negro might justly and lawfully be reduced to slavery for his benefit. I mean, I know you follow me, family. So I just want that to simmer there. I'm going to touch on another thing in history. I'm going to touch on one more little topic in history before I roll out. Let me find this little history. And then I got to get out of here. All right. I'm going to give you a little history about this. When we get things connotated in religious books, when I say oral, religious so-called truth, our analogy, parables, symbology, allegory, parable. Southern redemption was the effort of the Southern Democrats to restore the South to the racial condition of white supremacy that had existed before the Civil War. The best way for the newly restored Democrat legislators to redeem their state from what had occurred to them following the Civil War was to deprive black Americans of their political rights by the passage of the state laws that restricted, removed, or even blatantly violated their civil rights, as well as though the prompt repeal of state Reconstruction laws that had suppressed Klan violence. Representative John Roy Lynch, who not only had helped pass the original federal rights law, but had also witnessed their subsequent violation at the state level throughout the period of the Southern redemption, accurately noted, the opposition to the civil rights in the South is confined almost exclusively to states under Democratic control. Democrats understood how important it was to their survival to prevent blacks from voting. In fact, an illustration from that period showed an allegory. Allegory. Remember when I tell you, the Bible and things is literature, family, and that's just things we have to understand and accept. But it showed an allegory of the Bible story of Samson, who lost his strength when his hair was cut. In that illustration, the woman named Southern Democracy had used her scissors, called the lost cause. I'm going to show you. Look. The European, look what she's doing. She cutting her hair. I mean, let me finish reading the story to you. I got to show you pictorial. This was in their papers. Regain, to cut the black Samson's hair and cause him to lose his strength. And what is his hair? His strength. Okay. It's called what? Suffrage. SUFFRAGE. Or what else, family? Voting. Your voting right. With the strength or the vote of the black Americans removed, various democratic groups and leaders were rejoining in the background. Confederates, the KKK pro-slavery forces, and several famous Democrat leaders of that day included General Nathan Bedford Forrest, the first Grand Wizard of the Klan. By the way of notice, the phrase, the Democratic barbecue, and the Democrats are burning various books in the foreground, including the Holy Bible. As in the illustration, confirmed limiting black voting became the major goal for Southern Democrats. And we're going to stop right there. You see it? So please, peace, family, view my YouTube page. I love you all. Shalom.